Hello and welcome to Mr. Judge's channel. I am your host, Mr. Judge. Today in court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have a feminist friendship. Now, as you all know, we are here to examine it, listen to the testimony, review the evidence, and then debunk it for the bullshit that it is. Let's proceed.
Do it a little bit better. So by calling myself a bad feminist, I was genuinely grappling with these issues, even within myself, because the truth is you don't ever actually graduate from feminism. And I was also responding to a particular moment in time. It was 2013 into 2014, when online feminist discourse about mainstream feminist discourse was blowing up. Women of color were calling out white women on their racism for not being intersectional in their fight against sexist oppression. And white women were getting very defensive, saying this call-out culture and internal conflicts were bad for the feminist movement itself. For example, see this evidence. The Nation ran a story by Michelle Goldberg titled Feminism's Toxic Twitter Wars, which itself became subject to pretty intense critique for being yet another mainstream platform that was centering white women as the representatives of feminism. So this exchange back and forth was really heated and intense, which is saying a lot because I was just watching all of this go down from my laptop in my living room. With the creation of new digital spaces, online publishing, the blogosphere, and social media, we have undergone a dramatic shift in how we are able to interact with one another. But more importantly, there's been a shift in who can interact with one another, whose voices are elevated, and which voices are heard. And this is incredible. It's also incredibly valuable for feminism. But as far as the history of feminism goes, that's pretty much the only thing that's new here. For many decades before Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality, women of color were calling out the inadequacies of white women's feminism. And the refrain has pretty...
So, you're mainly saying that social justice, feminist wars happen, feminist civil wars happen on Twitter, which is only common due to the fact that SJWs, when they do not no longer have a common goal, they tend to start civil wars, group up against one another, and as you just pointed out, against whites against blacks, and etc., basically going against each other. And you're basically saying the only thing new now is that it now is trying to make the history new, I guess? Let's move on.
Feminists who didn't appreciate this history, it's no wonder they were suddenly feeling attacked. Centuries worth of mistrust and betrayal and frustration from women of color was now readily and unequivocally directed at white feminists in 140 characters and incisive hashtags like solidarity is for white women. And yet, not a whole lot has changed. Here we are, 2017, mere months after the Women's March, an awesomely historic event that spurred demonstrations on every single continent. And while millions of people took to the street, no amount of pink pussy hats would guard against legitimate critique and skepticism. Unless those millions continued to fight for the rights of black, queer, trans, native, Muslim, undocumented, and poor women, then even one's participation in the Women's March could be viewed as a superficial show of solidarity at best. So when these concerns were posted online, you guessed it, many people, namely white women, said it was the critics and the skeptics who were being divisive by not merely celebrating that so many people came out for this march. So apparently, neither an unprecedented amount of access to feedback on one's activism, nor political events so alarming to mobilize an entire planet are enough to...
So basically, racial-induced, self-proclaimed victimization attacked a supposed non-victimized and supposedly privileged group, is basically what you're saying that happened. And it's interesting that you say, hundreds of years of mistrust. and abuse and etc. etc. When, if you historically put it back, unless you're talking about maybe slavery, which plenty of colored women of color were there, and that would apply, there was no there. To be honest, guys, these feminists, they constantly claim, "Oh, women were oppressed for hundreds of years," and yeah, yeah, yeah. Reality is, you weren't oppressed. Did you have equal rights? No. But you still had rights to education, you still had rights to home ownership, you could still have education, jobs, land ownership. In fact, the only rights you didn't have back then are rights you don't use now, such as voting or going into politics or joining the army, which, by the way, still doesn't have you mandatory for going like it does me and every other guy in general. So I have to say, this whole, and not to mention that even if these claims of abuse, racial tension were all true to their very bone, the fact would still remain that they're not the way now. So there would be no excuse for any violence and terror under its name. Also, when you say Women's Liberation March, historical ones, did you mean this one?
The Women's Suffrage Parade of 1913, officially the Women's Suffrage Procession, was the first suffrage parade in Washington, D.C., organized by the suffragist Alice Paul for the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Thousands of suffragists marched down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. on March 3, 1913. The event was scheduled on the day before President Woodrow Wilson's inauguration to march in spirit of protest against the presidential or political organization of society from which women are excluded. As the official program stated, the march and attention it attracted were monumental in advancing women's suffrage in the United States. The parade is scheduled to be depicted and honored in recognition of the United States $10 trillion in 2020.
Or are you mentioning this?
And when I wake up, I recognize you looking at me for the pay cut. Bahamas, I be looking at you from the face down. One Mac 11, even boom with the face down. Scheming, and let me tell you about my life. Painkillers only put me in the twilight. With pretty pussy and Benjamin is the highlight.
One is historic, where it actually helped women's. I personally don't consider it a liberation, but liberation. I only say I don't believe it's a liberation because I don't believe women were ever oppressed. But to be fair, women's liberation, as they call it, that actually helped them by gaining support. This one, however, with the pussy hats, as you mentioned, doesn't help jack shit. In fact, it would make anybody second guess whether you're actually serious or not. And at the very all, do you need mental help?
They fight the same fight, and with a barrage of sources saying, hey, it's a favor, fix your face. So rather than just hanging out in the blogosphere some more, I spent the past few years returning to feminist essays written by women of color from the 70s and the 80s. And the resonance has not faded. But one essay in particular has really stuck out to me. In 1983, which is before I was even born, two theorists, Maria Lugones and Elizabeth Spellman, published Have We Got a Theory for You? This piece is amazing. It's nuanced and it's comprehensive in how it outlines these ongoing tensions between women of color and white women within feminism. But it's also really unique in that it's written by a woman of color and a white woman in their own voices, but together. And like so many others, they say that in order to do better, to leverage our differences, we need to engage in dialogue. Genuine, reciprocal dialogue. And yet they immediately call this into question as even possible or desirable because it's super hard and most of us don't seem to know how to do it. Engaging in dialogue isn't just talking with other people for fun. Engaging in genuine reciprocal dialogue is the sort of engagement that puts us outside of ourselves and into another person's world. It's about really listening and being willing to have our assumptions and our self-conceptions shattered as a result, especially if you come from a place of privilege. That's because privilege doesn't just refer to these benefits and unearned advantages that help you navigate the world more easily. Privilege can also be negatively characterized as a lack or a deficit, in knowledge, insight, understanding, experience, and cultural fluidity.
So basically, you're saying you rely on a essay that was written, 1980, so that would have been over 40 years ago. You weren't even born. And you believe that document somehow of past arguments and racial aggression, which happened a lot during the 1970s. You believe that it's somehow related to now when you openly admit it's from the 70s. Come the fuck on. If there are racial tensions, if there are arguments and issues and problems right now that you're discussing right now, that are happening right now, it doesn't matter what's happened 70 years ago, what one person wrote hundreds of years ago, 30 years ago, or even 20 years ago. What matters is, why is it happening now, you idiot? Not, oh, well, this famous person wrote this famous person wrote that. It doesn't matter. Now, admittedly, it did have a sense to it when it said regional, genuine talk to talk out your problems. Now, admittedly, I do support that in a sense that we do need that discussion is a vital role in handling arguments. However, what you fail to realize is that you can't really engage in the type of conversation that the document portrays when both sides are unable to talk to each other. Us conservatives can't really get on a common basis with leftist, feminist, liberals like yourself, because whenever we do, you always demonize us as the privileged, as the people who oppress you or whatever. And every time, that's what happens when we try talking to you. And every time you try talking to us, all you have to say is, take down your oppression, give us free college, give us free stuff, make the money give us money. And when we say, well, we can't, it's not how it works that way, your response is, oppression, rally, revolution. It's like no common ground. No common ground, no fixing a problem. I'm sorry.
Coming from a place of privilege, you have to recognize that there's a whole lot going on and a whole lot at stake that you probably don't get because you've never had to get it. So assume you're missing information, that you're unfamiliar with the issues, and that you have a lot of learning to do before you can start explaining anything or even appropriately taking action. Engaging in genuine reciprocal dialogue seems like a really promising antidote to address what Lugones and Spellman refer to as this asymmetry in working knowledge. But again, immediately, the desirability of this dialogue is called into question because sometimes what people think counts as learning about our differences can actually do more harm than good. So, depending on how clued in you are, maybe you already know these things. You know that color blindness, a savior complex, white guilt, and white tears are not helpful. You know that stereotyping, exoticizing, projecting your own image onto others is harmful. You may also know that
typical SJW social justice warrior behavior and rational thought. Oh, there's a problem. Oh, but just thinking about it or just trying to rationalize it is harmful. Just listen to us. You should just assume you know nothing. You shouldn't apply your education or rational thinking or whatever. Just assume you're an idiot and educate yourself more. Empty out your brainwashing, essentially. Empty out your mind of everything you once knew and learn and join us, is basically the message here. She's basically saying, we shouldn't look at situations of social differences or social justice. We shouldn't approach it in a rational thinking manner. We should approach it as a blank expression that and blank train of thought and wait for the knowledge to just come to us by listening rather than look, observe, think, analyze, get evidence, and then act upon it. It's like saying, "Oh, I know a secret, but for you to know the secret, you must empty everything, assume you know nothing, and listen." It's brainwashing, it's stupidity, and it's hypocrisy. 500 on hypocrisy.
Your own image onto others is harmful. You may also know that centering your own needs and shifting the burden and asking others to educate you to make you a better person is unfair and problematic, and so is white-splaining and mansplaining and any other kind of splaining that happens when you assume that now you can speak on behalf of others rather than letting them speak for themselves. There are a lot of ways to do this very poorly, but I do believe that anyone can do this well if we agree on two things. The first is an important little reminder. The whole purpose of social justice work is liberation of the oppressed from oppression, to end oppression, not to feel good about ourselves, not to say we're a good person, but because oppression is unquestionably bad, and its existence is a threat to all of our humanity. That means that we all depend on our work being 100% in response to the needs of the oppressed. If we can agree on that one shared common goal, which is to end oppression, then all of the rest of this gets a lot easier. Because now, if you don't listen to the people with whom you claim to stand in solidarity, you should expect to be...
You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? We shouldn't think that we know the problem. We should assume we don't know. We should just sit back and learn, pretty much do what we're told. And if we ask to be taught the question, if we ask to be taught what we supposedly are to assume we don't know, we are oppressing people. Apparently, asking questions is now another form of oppression. Asking others to educate you on a subject you're supposedly not aware of is now inconsiderate. I should just flaunt everything openly. I don't know anything. I should sit back and listen. But I shouldn't ask to be educated on something I obviously don't know about. No, because if I do, I will be inconsiderate. You can't... So, we're supposed to not know this, learn from it, but not ask people to teach us? How the fuck does that work? Lady, how the fuck does that work? Now, secondly, all those terms, mansplaining, white guilt, everything you pretty much just said in those definitions are lies, hypocrisy, made up, or just flat out propaganda. You idiot.
Is that this is hard work. But like I said before, the hardest work is the work we must do on ourselves. Lugones and Spellman said that in order for white women to enter into a genuine reciprocal dialogue with women of color, they would have to learn to become unintrusive, unimportant, and patient to the point of tears. They would have to deal with being viewed with mistrust and have their own feelings of alienation and having their world thoroughly disrupted and criticized by those who had been harmed by it. This process is so demanding and so difficult that Lugones and Spellman say it doesn't make sense to enter into this out of one's own self-interest because you're basically signing up for a very rude awakening. Instead, they suggest that the only motivation that makes sense for entering into this sort of dialogue
You know what's really funny? She's making all these racist accusations against white women, yet this is a white woman. And your whole description pretty much is pretty much saying, oh, you have to torment them, you have to alienate them, you have to be patient to the point of tears. How the fuck are you gonna cry being patient? I don't know how you cry like that. Being patient is somehow so horrible you gotta cry at a certain point? And then you say they must be alienated, they must have their whole world torn under them. You're basically saying for them to join you, they must undergo humiliation, racial abuse, and yeah, that's pretty much what you're saying that they'd have to do. Just to be a part of your merry mariachi band. That is a type of cult that I would not join. I mean, even I'm a man, so obviously I wouldn't join this. But even if I weren't, I would never join a group that pretty much says, oh, for required membership, based on my skin, I must be emotionally tortured. Fucking idiots.
They suggest that the only motivation that makes sense for entering into this sort of dialogue is that of friendship out of friendship. And that, to me, was key. So I have spent the past couple of years developing that brief mention of friendship out of friendship into a model that can apply to anyone who does social justice work. We need to engage in reciprocal dialogue, but we have to know how to do it so we don't keep reanimating those problems found in white feminism. And I call this model feminist friendship. Feminist friendship draws on how we engage with our closest friends to illustrate how we could better engage in social justice work by focusing on the motivation and the methods for both. So, I want you to take a second. Think of someone who you deeply love and care about. Maybe your best friend. Or if it's easier, just think of someone who loves you best and knows how and when to show up for you. When it comes to engaging with our best friends, the whole motivation for being with them is the relationship, friendship itself. If we befriend others out of our own need to feel validated or look cool, or to get access to their lake house, or invites to their epic parties, that's a perversion of the meaning of friendship. And our motivation for why we go into relationship with others informs how we show up for them, our methods. With our closest friends, we respond to their needs because we care about them and we want what's best for them, no matter what, even if it's inconvenient for us. We will pick up the phone in the middle of the night and go help them get out of a bad situation, even if it's one of their own making. This relates to our first agreement, that the sole purpose of social justice work is to respond to the needs of the oppressed, not only when it's convenient for us, but because that's what's demanded of us if we claim to do this work. So we would go out of our way to make sure that our friends got home safe after a night of heavy drinking, and likewise, we have to go out of our way to destroy the deadly systems of violence that harm entire communities. We can also glean some insights based on how we engage with our friends in dialogue. We know it's poor form to offer unsolicited advice or try to dismiss someone's pain and say they're just overreacting. Sometimes, rather than talking so much or trying to solve another person's problem, it's better to just listen. Listening is itself an important way to show support, because it offers something that we all need, which is to know that we're seen and we're heard and we're understood. But of course, when we listen, we might also learn other ways that we could take care of our friends when they're feeling bad. Like maybe we'll know that they just need to go for a walk.
So basically, you're saying that not only do you want to destroy the family unit, not only do you want to cover the earth in protective SJW layers of propaganda and agendas, which would be total fucking anarchy if they could, you now seek to destroy the sacred bond of friendship. And and it's incredible how feminism grows, guys. It's a cancer, an absolute fucking cancer. You know, you can't fucking. This is the problem with SJWs. You talk to any of them, regardless of subject, regardless of who, and one way or another, it relates to either SJWism or feminism, or at worst, BLMs, Black Lives Matter, or something that affiliates their agenda and something that promotes their hatred and globalist attempts as a group. It's fucking sad, it's irritating, it's annoying, and even when we cut one group out, a new one grows. First it was family, then it went on to witchcraft, and then it went on to occults, and then it went on to governments, and now it's fucking gone on to friendship. For fuck's sakes.
And apologize like they mean it. When I started putting together this model of feminist friendship, I thought this is going to be so easy for people to get because we know how to be a good friend, right? All we have to do is recognize we already employ these skills with the people we care about, so we just need to apply them to how we engage in dialogue with others for social justice. But it hasn't been that easy. Some people are too quick to jump to this conclusion that all we need to do to end oppression is go out and make more friends, hold hands, get along, sing kumbaya. And while there is an important implication here, which is the real political significance behind who we know and love and call our closest friends, the point of feminist friendship is not to just go make more friends and sing kumbaya. The point of feminist friendship is to work better together to end oppression. Plus, it'd be pretty misguided to assume that people would suspend their mistrust of us and want to be friends with us if we haven't demonstrated that we've got their back no matter what. So for bad feminists and folks with privilege, we have to wonder why there's a difference between how we show up for the friends that we care about and how we show up for others when we say we care about social justice. What the model of feminist friendship teaches us is that before we can expect to stand in solidarity with others, we have to do that hard work to dismantle the oppressive structures within ourselves. We have to do that hard work to become worthy of friendship at all.
Know how to be a good friend. Oh yes, feminist. Feminism and SJWism has always been the bestest friends. I mean, it's not like you've demonized an entire gender. It's not like you've practically accused everyone of racism or being some sort of oppressor and have made complete idiots of yourselves before. It's not like, oh, we don't have better things to do than listen to your drama that you have an endless supply to. It's not like we want to, I don't know, keep our intelligence, and which you seem to get so intent on poisoning with your faulty logic and horrific anti-social justice warrior propaganda. This thing is doomed to failure, just like all of feminism is. It's doomed to failure. So is SJWism. You guys were, but as I said, you guys are a cancer, so even if we cut you down, even if we remove one part of you, a new one will sprout up always. But hey, thanks for giving me a video to make fun of you out. I find you guilty of hypocrisy, lies, and all in all retardedness. Let's see, that's 600 for 2 counts of hypocrisy, 3 counts of idiocy, and stupidity, that'll be 750, and have a great day.